The September 11th, 2023 meeting of the Fountain Hills Planning and Zoning Commission. If you would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Paula, roll call, please.
Commissioner Corey?
Here.
Commissioner DePaul?
Present.
Commissioner Dempster?
Here.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Here.
Commissioner Watts?
Here.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg?
Here.
Chairman Gray?
Here, thank you, Paula. Agenda item 3, call to the public. Paula, do we have any open call speaker cards?
No, Chairman.
Thank you, Paula. Number 4, consideration and possible action to approve the meeting minutes from the August 14th, 2023 venue. Commissioners, any discussion or a motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of Planning and Zoning Commission, August 14th, 2023.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, consideration and possible action to appoint a chairperson to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I guess first we'll start off with commissioners, those that have interest in the position of chair.
I think you're it.
Nobody else? Okay. Then in relation to agenda item 5, do we have a nominee for the position of chair? Commissioner Watts.
I nominate a person by the name of Peter Gray.
If you
I will second that.
Commissioner Watts has made the nomination. Commissioner DePaul has seconded. Paula, let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Corey?
Aye.
Commissioner DePaul?
Aye.
Commissioner Dempster?
Aye.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Aye.
Commissioner Watts?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg?
Aye.
Chairman Gray?
Aye.
7-0.
Thank you, Paula. Agenda item 6, consideration and possible action. I guess there's no, why is there possible action, John? It's just action, right? Consideration and action to appoint a vice chair to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Commissioners, those that have interest?
Or a motion?
Commissioner Corey, Commissioner Watts, Commissioner Dempster?
I wanted to make a motion.
Are you sure? It's the last chance to stay in.
I had my turn. Thank you.
All right. So commissioners seeking the nomination are Commissioner Watts and Commissioner Corey. It's rare that we have 2. We thought we might have 2 tonight. Let's just do 60 seconds or less. Reasons for seeking nomination, and then we'll look for a nomination from the rest of the commission. Commissioner Corey?
Sure. All right. Thank you, Chair. Well, I would like to continue to contribute to the change, and just wanted to make sure that I offered my service to step up if the need was there and help shape the future of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Also, I think it's an important role to help influence others. You know, I'm a graduate from the Leadership Academy, and I want to be able to have them see that there's a diverse group of people up here that can help lead the Planning and Zoning Commission. Personally, for personal growth, of course, skill development, a sense of accomplishment. And also, you know, I think the unique part that I bring to the table is diversity of style, have an inclusive personality, foster a sense of belonging, you know, as you do as well, but I think it's important to make everyone feel welcome and that they're a part of this team. So that's what I would bring.
Thank you, Commissioner Corey. Commissioner Watts.
Thank you, Chairman Gray, for the question and the opportunity to present my qualifications. First off, it's 40 years plus as a contractor, business owner, and as well as a 35-year member of the town of Fountain Hills. So been here a long time, seen an awful lot. Second, I've got an extensive background in management, business, finance, goal setting, and accomplishment of those goals, planning, project management, all of the things that are related to planning and zoning, the things that we normally see that are presented to us. Third, I've got a deep understanding of the role of planning and zoning, what we're expected to do, how we're supposed to protect the interests of the public, and how we go about that. Not always in the easiest and less painful way, but that's the goal of the town. And my background lends itself to being strong enough to ask tough questions of any applicant, and also to help find solutions that are in the best interest of the town and the town residents as well. So those are the qualifications that I think I bring, and my focus in addition to that will continue to be on the residents, the best interests, the things that serve the town and the residents as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Watts. Commissioners, any questions of the two possible vice chairs? Or if not, we'll seek a nominee from the commission.
I'll nominate Rick Watts.
Commissioner Kovacevic has nominated Commissioner Watts. Is there a second to that nomination?
I like both candidates, but if we were to pick one, I would also say Commissioner Watts has an extensive background and has shown extensive knowledge in land use and what we do, and so I would go with Watts as well.
So that's a second for Commissioner Watts?
Yes.
And a nomination, is there a nomination for Commissioner Corey?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Corey. He does have seniority, I believe. He's been on the commission a little longer, and I think that's important. And I've seen him in action in other areas in Fountain Hills. Are you on the sanitary district board? And I think he is very modest and has not conveyed some of the other positions that you've held and things that you've done. So, but I do think you have a lot of experience as well.
Okay, Commissioner Dempster has made a nomination for Commissioner Corey. Is there a second to that nomination? Very odd that we have two nominees. I'll go ahead and second the nomination for Commissioner Corey to keep the proceedings in order here. Based on seniority, we'll first do a roll call vote for Commissioner Corey. And if successful, Commissioner Corey, based on that seniority, would be appointed. If that vote is not favorable, then we will proceed to a roll call vote for Commissioner Watts. Paula?
Commissioner Corey?
You going to vote for yourself or not?
Aye.
Commissioner DePauw?
I'm a little perplexed as to what it is that we're going to be.
Based on Commissioner Corey's seniority on the commission, we're first taking up his roll call vote to be appointed for vice chair. If his roll call vote is not 4-3 or greater, then we'll take up a roll call vote for Commissioner Watts. Again, it's just solely predicated on the seniority.
Commissioner DePauw?
Nay.
Commissioner Dempster?
Aye.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Nay.
Commissioner Watts?
Nay.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg?
Nay.
Chairman Gray?
Aye. 4-3 against?
3, 4, and 4 against.
Okay. On that basis, we will take up a roll call vote for Commissioner Watts to be appointed to the position of vice chair.
Commissioner Corey?
Nay.
Commissioner DePauw?
Yay.
Commissioner Dempster?
Nay.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Aye.
Commissioner Watts?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Schlossberg?
Aye.
Chairman Gray?
Aye.
5-2.
Okay, thank you, Paula. It's an interesting way to get to a conclusion, but hopefully a fair one. On to the main event, agenda item 7, public hearing, consideration and possible action on ordinance 2304 to repeal and replace the zoning ordinance, chapter 6, signage regulations. John.
Chairman, Commissioners, good evening. Good to be with you this evening. And hopefully it is, let's take out the possible action. Let's take action tonight. We'd really like to get this on to council, so hopefully we can come to a conclusion. Not that I'm trying to rush anything, and certainly the commission can continue to take as much time as you need. But just quick background, again, Town Council has asked staff, the Planning Commission, to consider possible amendments to the sign ordinance. The council believes there are some areas that should be modified to better meet the needs of businesses in the community. And the commission has previously reviewed the draft language and provided feedback and discussion to council at a couple of previous meetings. So again, the town council's goal has been to primarily to increase options, signage for businesses. What I've heard from the commission primarily over the last couple of meetings is a concern for too much sign clutter. Staff's role in this has been to try to hear what the council and the commission is looking for, things we hear from the public. As staff, we don't care if it's more signs, bigger signs, smaller signs, fewer signs, different kinds of signs. We're just trying to hear what the community is looking for, what the commission is looking for, and try to put that into legible, enforceable, and understandable ordinance. And so we've taken what we've heard previously and supplied to you a draft ordinance that we hope has gotten there. If not, hopefully we can figure out where those other changes might be needed this evening and get to a successful conclusion. What I would like to do first this evening is just go through each category where signs might be used and make sure we understand what the code as modified and drafted and presented to you would allow. And then we'll talk about a few other questions, and if necessary, we can go into the individual actual changes that are being proposed. So to start with permanent signage allowed for commercial industrial signs or commercial industrial developments. Just want to make one statement up front. The previous ordinance, prior to the amendment we did a year or so ago, had aggregate maximums on the number of signs. We took that out, and so that's not in the code today and won't be in the code going forward unless you make some change. So as we look at each of these types that are allowed, it's not that you get one or another. A business could have all of them if they so chose and it fit on their property. So a business could have an awning sign at 1 square foot per foot of frontage, building wall sign, drive-through sign, freestanding wall fence sign, hanging under canopy sign, monument sign, on-site directional, projecting, window signs. So those are the sign types and basic sizes allowed as permanent signage for commercial industrial property. Any questions about those basic allowances for permanent signs?
One quick question, John.
Yes.
Are the window signs, do they require the same type of a permit that a fixed sign, a monument sign, it permits a permit?
I'm going to say yes. I can't recall that we've had any window signs as permanent signs come in. But we would, doesn't need a building permit per se, but that's the only way we'd be able to tell them that, yes, you meet your 50% requirement.
Okay.
That'd be the only thing we'd be looking for.
But they have to apply for and get a permit?
Yes, I'm not aware of anything that would exempt them in the code. Maybe look at that a little closer, but I don't know of an exemption.
Do they just post that permit number on the front of the window then, somewhere on that window? Is there a specific place to post it?
So that once a sign is constructed, there would be no need to post the permit anywhere.
Except for compliance.
Right, yeah, I mean, initially, they'd apply for it to get issued and have a permit number. At some point, they would have the sign installed and request inspection would go see that, yes, it meets what was approved, and they'd be done. There'd be no ongoing reason to post the permit.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions there. We'll move on to temporary signage allowance for commercial industrial. So A-frame, T-frames, one per entry with a maximum of two. One sign, 6 square feet if you have two signs, aggregate of 9. So a 6 and a 3, a 5 and a 4, whatever, as long as they meet the aggregate of 9. Allowed in the right-of-way adjacent to commercial, including Shea. Not on a sidewalk, except for in the town center pedestrian area. And those in the right-of-way, sunrise to sunset. Could have balloons. Could have banners. This has been one of the talking points about how long you can have the banner. And so the latest proposal is maximum of 150 days per calendar year, maximum of 30 days at a time. So you could do that 30 days 5 times a year. You could do 12 days 10 times a year. 12 days, anyway, whatever the combination you want. And they still have in there the provision, if that's not enough, you can apply for the temporary use permit to consider allowing, if there's something unique, to give you additional beyond that. And the other one that we've talked about that you may want to, again, revisit as we talk about it now is the new business. We talked about half a year to a full year. I've gone ahead and include the full year. They can be switched out, but they must be maintained per the requirements in the code for maintaining a sign. I know that's been one of the concerns before. It gets tattered and torn over a period of time. And if that's the case, then code compliance can tell them they need to get it replaced, repaired. So are we good with the 1 year, or we want to go with less than that?
I was just gonna, I'm fine with the 1 year, but is there, I hate that we're even having this conversation. Is there a loophole in that to get to 1.5 years if you get into that second calendar year and go for 150 days on the back of your inaugural year?
Well, so yes. So you go through your inaugural year, then your next year you're allowed 150 days. You couldn't do it all at once, 30 days at a time.
And then do we define, we don't define year by a January 1, December 31, right? It's
correct.
Okay.
But for the new business 1 year, it would be from when they get their business license and or erect the sign after that point for a year.
Okay.
But the other one, the 150 days, that is based on a calendar year.
Commissioner Watts.
Commissioner Gray, John, I'm confused because are we going through this as we do in the chapter itself by section, or are we looking at each of these individually kind of exclusive? I took and put everything by chapter.
Okay.
So we jumped all of a sudden to section, where the heck did it go? To section A4. Should we ask questions as we go here, or are we going to continue to go through by section number?
So Chairman, Vice Chair Watts, my plan here this evening was to first go through and make sure we have an understanding what the code allowances are just across the board for all the signs. And then as necessary, we can go into the detail of each sign type and go through each of the actual changes. I do have those slides available below here. But this would be a good place initially to bring up questions and comments if you have them.
Okay. In that case, then I think that the 1 year has to be determined. Is it going to be determined by when they start construction because a banner goes up at that point? Is it when they get a C of O? Or is it the business license when they get that? Because they may get a business license but not actually conduct business per se until the building is done or the tenant improvement is done. So what's the trigger on those?
Trigger is a business license for a new business at that location.
So if they waited 90 days for construction, then they're going to be reduced to 60 days for the banner to be in place.
If they applied for so they have to have a new business license, and then from that allows them then the year because it's a new business, but they would apply for the actual banner permit that allows them that year whenever they're ready to put up the banner, and they'd get a year from that point.
They get a year from the time that they apply for the business license.
From the time they apply for the banner permit.
The banner permit.
Right.
And when they start using that permit, they've got 1 year.
Correct.
From that point.
Correct.
150 days within that year.
For the new business license, a solid full year, 365 days.
Is your concern the coming soon sign?
Yeah, I mean,
That-
there's a variety of them.
That's why it allows it to be switched out. The first sign they put up for a month or two is a coming soon sign, then take that down and put up, okay, it's just a business name, because now they're past
I
that coming
think
soon
his
sign.
point is, though inevitably, coffee shop X is going to be coming soon long before their business license is in place, theoretically, right? I mean, they're going to want that 120 day, maybe not 120, let's say 90 days ahead of license, or is the license process generally more accelerated?
The license typically doesn't take very long, matter of a few days usually.
But if it were a coffee shop, can they actually solicit and receive a business license before they have a certificate of occupancy? I think generic, they were just,
I don't believe so.
no. So then they would be disenfranchised to some degree by not being able to advance advertise their business through,
Well, they could use that part of their 150-day.
not if their trigger is the, unless you're allowing them to backdate the start of their time clock. If I understood it right, the day zero on their clock is business license issuance. If they can't obtain that business license until they achieve substantial completion or certificate of occupancy, then they've lost out on that window pre-opening to say, coming soon, coming March of 2024 or whatever.
So from that, the property is drawing on that 150 days of the calendar year to do anything prior to the 1 year they get once they get the new business open.
I see, okay. Okay.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't just make it clearer that it's from the certificate of occupancy. That's going to,
It's not necessarily a new build.
well, but even a tenant improvement requires a C of O when
You
you.
might not even have a tenant improvement. If it's just a new business in an existing retail space, they might just move in.
I just don't want to short circuit the whole process either, and to, penalize somebody unintentionally.
Correct.
Because when you start, and my focus is really on if I took one of the facilities that we've got all fenced off, and you've got this plethora of signs that we really don't have a lot of control over, but they pepper the fence with signs from every contractor that's on that site for advertisement purposes. I don't know that we address those, and I don't know that the owner of that business is going to be disenfranchised by having those signs up, or are they?
So section 6.08B is signs for property under construction. And there's an allowance there for those temporary signs that would go on the fence or
Okay.
whatever for those contractors. So that's separate from any of this allowance.
As long as we don't do any harm, but I'm okay with that.
Commissioner Dempster?
Maybe just a clarification, John, just to further, in the miscellaneous requirements, under subsection Roman numeral 3, item 2, it says 1 year from the date the business opens, so maybe 1 year from the date of the banner application. Would that clarify?
Possibly, but again, it's a timing in an individual case. Somebody might get their door unlocked and start the business and not be ready to put up their sign for a few days. Or they might have
But
ordered
they'd
the
have
sign,
to
but-
apply?
But when
Excuse me.
they apply, they tell us what date they want to start with the sign, and then it'd be 1 year from that date that they would.
So you'd work with the business, it's not, I think Commissioner Watts is trying to protect that business that's looking for the different stages of coming soon versus, we're here and we change our hours or something. That,
Well, you've got pre-grand openings and
Yeah.
all of that sorts of things, so you've got a variety of signs that could go up. And are they a trigger event, is what I'd be concerned about.
So again, do you think the 150-day allowance per calendar year that can be used in addition to this would cover it?
I'm okay with 150 days in a calendar year, 30 days at a time, and the change. I just don't know what starts that 1-year period, and I think that's where we need something of a qualifier that causes that event to start.
Okay. And it does say from the date the business opens, it is how it is in the code. So hopefully an applicant would properly time their application and the posting of the sign based on when they're going to open. But we can adjust that if there's some other language that works better.
Well, I certainly don't want to hold the whole evening up talking about this particular issue. So I think this is going to be one of those situations where let's see how it works, because we can always come back and amend it later if need be. Sure. Either strengthen it or weaken it, whatever, because it may not be sufficient. I'm sorry,
Come back at your own peril, Commissioner. We're not coming back.
I get it, but I thought there was an easy answer, but clearly there's not. So thank you, John.
So, John, before you leave it,
Yes.
and I hate to go the other side of this, but I don't recall language anywhere that ties down, ties a scenario like this down to needing to have the site already improved, right? So could I buy a vacant commercial lot and stand a sign up for 150 consecutive days, or do I need to have improvement on the site to do that? I do.
Yes.
Where is that reference back? How do we tie that down? Because I couldn't find that. I'll accept it if you say it's in there. I'm good and we can move on. I just wanted to double check it.
So 608B, temporary sign allowance for construction on undeveloped property. So I guess if I'm a vacant lot over here off of Verde River or wherever, certainly that vacant lot can have a post and board sign on it because you're trying to sell it. And they might put a yard sign on it to help attract. So you can have signs. Banner signs are.
But if I wanted to put up a
Particular.
big sign that said medical office building here, build to suit type of thing.
So to have the bigger ones that you sometimes see with properties like that, the code currently says you need to be at least 5 acres in size, I believe. Turn back to that. So if that should be smaller, we can certainly make that smaller. Where'd it go? Maybe that's a different section. So maybe it doesn't have a size here. No, okay, that's elsewhere. So this one, I guess it is up in the post and board signs. Post and board signs is the one that says they have to be 5 acres or larger to have a 32 square foot sign. So we could make that smaller if you prefer, to cover any size vacant parcel.
I suppose I'm
Which is-
indifferent. What I was just trying to avoid is, we can't control the messaging on the sign. If you got a vacant plot, 150 days a year, you could throw up a pretty significant message.
Yeah, you can put a post and board sign up there permanently. Put a yard sign there permanently.
Okay. Well, I'm willing to move on.
Which brings us to post and boards. I guess it didn't include the vacant piece on here. We just don't see that very much. But again, temporary commercial, industrial, post and boards, 1 per street front, 6 square feet, 8 feet tall, allowed in the right of way. Sign walkers are allowed. Window signs, 50% of the window. Yard sign, 8 square foot, 5 foot tall. As I was going back through this after sending it out, I realized it had not included the same sunrise to sunset provision in here that was intended, and so I've added that into this section. So those yard signs, commercial areas except Shea. Questions on the temporary sign allowance for commercial industrial?
Not on the commercial, but you did have flags on the previous, and we didn't speak about that. I do have a question because I've seen flag poles with uplighting, and being a dark sky community, would it make sense to put a notation about, or, you know, how you have notations back to other parts of the ordinance, to put a notation to the dark sky rules about uplighting? Because I think traditionally people uplight flags, and
We could look at that.
just a thought.
Okay. Multifamily, permanent sign allowance.
Was that 607, John? Or am I too far into this?
Excuse me, for what?
The temp commercial that you just left there,
So those would really all be in 608.
608.
Yes. That's where you find all the detail.
So is it 6? Where are the election corridors? Are in 607 or 608?
So 607 has, I think, that type of language that you may be looking for there.
Are we going to circle back to that one in the presentation?
Not well, yes, we will. We'll get
Okay.
there.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll wait then.
Because it did come up.
Chair, I do have a question about 607. While
Commissioner
you're,
Watt. John said we're going to come back to 607.
oh, we are going to come back to 607? Okay.
We'll see if we get to the question you have in 607, but I've got all of it here. We've got 50, 60 slides, so. Multifamily. Permanent signage allowance, awning canopy signs, building wall signs, freestanding wall signs, monument signs. Any questions, needs for permanent signage for multifamily?
A comment on the hanging signs under the walkways and so on. The bottom of those signs being 8 feet. I know that I like to jump up and touch signs. So this is my bad. Should they be that low or should they be higher? And I think my preference would be they'd be higher so people aren't jumping, hitting the signs, or a temptation for people.
What's your vertical jump?
Better than, enough to get to 8 feet. A volleyball court I can block, so that's an 8-foot net. Do we have any practical data to support the 8-foot height, or, because my opinion is just that. I know that I can reach 8 feet, and it's a temptation for kids and others.
So it's been too long since I looked at the old code. I suspect we didn't change many of those types of standards. So I suspect that's what has been the standard for a period of time, but I have to go back and verify that. I don't know that we've issued any of that type of sign
No issues?
in the last 4 years, issued any sign permits for that type of sign. I've not heard of any issues or any concerns, property owners coming back and saying, oh, people keep hitting my sign and I want to change it. But
Well, they hit it, they put sticky stuff on it, and they put labels,
Yeah,
and
right.
it's a temptation when it's that low, so. just
So
a-
again, whatever the commission wants to do, 10, 12 feet, we'll do whatever you want to do. But I don't know if there's been any problems with 8.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
An island on that one. Okay.
Permanent signage, multifamily, again, any questions, comments, concerns about that allowance? Hearing none. Temporary signs for multifamily. So again, A-frames is directional only. Same size, right-of-way. When used as the residential directional, can have 1 on the property and then 5 additional. If you're a 20-unit or more complex, you could have then a banner sign. And again, the same allowances for the number of days. And again, the flagpole allowance. Post and board allowance. And the yard signs. We had some discussion last time about how to handle condominiums. I proposed something a little bit more than this. Commission didn't seem too thrilled with it, but I still felt like on the smaller ones, the 2 and 3 units, where you really just have a couple of owners that can work together, hopefully, if they have that signage need, to leave that allowance in there. Questions on temporary allowance for multifamily? Then we
Mr.
have-
Watts?
Whoops.
Help me understand, I see the 2 to 3 for 2 per unit, and I see the over 20. Is there a gap between 4 to 19 that we don't cover?
So this one, in terms of the banner. So
Well, this occurs a couple of different places where we talk 2 to 3 and then go jump to 20, so.
Right. And so, but they're different sign types. It's not the same sign type. And so before, I had suggested maybe some more allowance for condominiums. The concern here, if you remember back to our discussion a couple of months ago, when you're in a condominium, you own the inside of your unit, but the ground is owned in common. And so when we base an allowance on a lot in that residential setting, there's one lot. And so you've got actually 2 owners. If they're limited to just the same 2 signs total, that one lot's allowed, that seemed to be a little bit restrictive. And in those smaller lot situations for the yard signs, we ought to allow each owner to have have the same rights as an individual property owner might have. And so, but once you got beyond 3 units, based on some of the discussion here, it seemed like, okay, it starts to get too confusing. The association is probably going to have more control over what's going on in that common area and so forth. So that's why it's limited to 2 or 3 there. But the 20 for the banner sign, again, that's a number I pulled out of the air. You want that higher, you want it lower, fine with that. But it's smaller apartment complexes just didn't seem to have the same need for a banner sign as a larger complex.
I think this is the same situation where I just want to make sure we don't disenfranchise somebody that's in that 4 to 19 and somebody in code enforcement says, well, you can only have 2 or you can have more or whatever the case may be. So if you're comfortable that there's no infractions today, then I can accept that.
See, I have no idea if there are infractions today or not. There could be some out there. But again, we're talking 2 different sign types.
Right, but either one could apply to that window between 4 and 19, regardless of the sign type, because it's referenced a couple of different places throughout the chapter. And it just seemed like there was this void where they weren't addressed. And maybe I didn't read it thoroughly enough. After so many hours, you get tired of reading this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's lengthy.
Anybody else have a concern or question here? Do we need to explore that further?
I just to talk it through, in the past, our traditional apartment complexes have been quite large, but recently the newer apartment complexes for rent are smaller, like on the corner of Saguaro and Gunsight. What is that, 9?
Mm-hmm.
And then Alago, so
There's a couple of 7s out there.
potentially, are newer, and we've approved some newer ones that are smaller than the large. So, and this is for the use of the complex owner,
Right,
right? Yeah.
right. Yeah, so the complex, so if you'd like to bring that down from 20 to
9.
9 or 5 or whatever number you want to bring that down to, because I pulled 20 out of the air.
I think I'd like to see it brought down because of our newest complexes and ones that we've approved recently.
I'd like to do the same thing. I'd like to take away the ambiguity between 3 and 20 and close that gap. So either take 3 up to some number and then 20 down to some number, and maybe it's 10, so that we capture the 7s and the 9s that we just recently approved, regardless of ownership. It would take away some of that ambiguity. So would you be okay with taking the 2 and 3 up to 10 and the 20 back down to 10, or to
Well,
11?
We're talking about banners. Can you go back one slide? Okay.
Oops, I go.
Thank
there we
you.
go.
So if 20 or more units, so less than 20 units, they would not be allowed a banner.
Correct. So if you'd like to, I heard him bring that down to 9. Is that a consensus of the commission? We can do that.
Be allowed a banner above 9? Is that what you're proposing?
9 or more units.
I'd support 9 or 10. It takes, I don't think a banner is appropriate in a small 7 to 9. That's why I went to 10. At 32 square feet, it's big. Where are they going to put it? Whose backyard, whose driveway? So I don't think that works there, but in the over 10, there should be enough room. I'd be fine with that, either 9 or 10.
We just approved 7 units. They're 18 feet wide, so 32 feet wouldn't even be across 2 units on that 7-unit building. So it's not that big. I mean, it was 2 by 16 instead of 4 by 8. It's still, well, it's going to be while the building's under construction. And while they're leasing, it's a for lease sign. I mean, that's when you're going to have the banner.
It doesn't say that, though. It says 150 days a year, and you can change the content.
Yeah, in a tenancy scenario, you have no control of that.
Right.
How about we don't allow any?
You're saying not allow any under 20? I mean, there's a lot of properties, there are properties that have renovations going on, newly remodeled, and they put banners up, and they have the space to support the properties, or the banners.
I think we're in that zone of trying to accommodate more than we reasonably need to accommodate with a signage ordinance. I think your point is if you have 10, 15, 20 units, you probably have a perimeter structure that a sign could be mounted to. It's not necessarily direct affixed to the units of the building. You get to that economy of scale when you start to get into the upper teens and 20s. That's probably why that threshold is there, is to facilitate, you know, your reservation there. When you get down to 10 and 9, you're talking about a complex that has no accessory structures, no accessories in the form of a perimeter, et cetera. It's just the building. So you're talking about affixing that, you know, to the building. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but
Chair, they'll typically have a landscape setback that it can go in as long as they don't damage any landscaping.
Could you put it in the right-of-way as well?
Not in the right-of-way, but it can be, again, in that landscape area adjacent to the right-of-way.
But nobody's going to do that. They're going to affix that to the building.
Most likely.
So for signage in multifamily, they have currently under 20 units, they have the A-frame ability. They have a flag.
A-frame as a directional only.
Okay, so for signage, can you go to the next slide, please? So they do have post and board
And yard signs.
and yard signs, so they do have other options.
So again, without, this gets tricky. So the post and board, or excuse me, the A-frame is a yard sign. So they can have an open, it's getting ready to open, so they have an open house on weekends and they put out the sign and lead people in. They can do that. because we really can't control the content of what's on those signs, they could actually be doing that more frequently than that. But that could then be used for a newly opening complex.
One last comment, maybe. Why can't you have a banner sign in the right-of-way as depicted in the picture that we've got, where it shows 2 posts and a banner sign stretched between those 2 posts? What's the difference between a post sign in the right-of-way and a banner sign with 2 posts in the right-of-way, other than size?
If you would like to allow them in the right-of-way, we can adjust it to be in the right-of-way.
I think, to Chairman's point, we're trying to accommodate everybody, and I'm just trying to find a way to eliminate heads and accommodate everybody, so. How would you feel about right-of-way?
I think we start to have more concerns with site visibility when we do that, but we could address that with each permit to make sure it wasn't blocking the site visibility along that. We already have the concern with the posts and boards when they go in the right-of-way because you're driving something into the ground and you don't know what utilities are under there. And so when you do that stake for the banners, you're, again, have that run that risk, but sometimes they do get torn and tattered and loose from their stakes, and now they're blowing out into the street. That might be another concern about having them out in the right-of-way. But again, whatever the commission wants to do.
I'm going to be the bad guy. I say no banner signs allowed in multifamilies. On multifamily residences. I don't see the point. The point of this is to try to facilitate the transaction, either the rental or the sale of the property. I don't want to see a bunch of signs bolted to EFS when I drive around town in all of these 10 complex units. I don't want to see it. I don't think it serves any purpose. It's cluttery. I mean, how many red opening soon signs do you need to see? And I think when you get into building and developing a 9-condo price point complex, you're into, you know, some bespoke marketing, or, you know, you're into things other than trying to capture the masses. And so I just don't think it's warranted. I think it needs to go away. And I'm alone in that. That's fine.
No, you're not. I think under 20, I think you could be alone, and it goes back to the area that is available to put the banners up. So I think there has to be some sort of a minimum footage that, so you don't have the issues when we looked at traffic patterns and turning and so on. We don't have those. I'm kind of amazed that we don't also force the applicant for the sign permit to get blue stake or the utilities to come out and stake before they put the sign in. I thought that would be part of it. It's kind of like, to me, a no-brainer. You've got water, you've got all kinds of stuff under there, so. But to my dismay, you probably don't have any of those issues either, right?
Not that I'm aware of. I did discuss that with the Public Works Director in terms of the post and board signs that can go in the right-of-way under the proposed code, and did we want to start requiring, I guess, a little bit outside my area, but I believe the blue stake is required for those, but nobody's able to really enforce it. So I talked to Public Works about requiring an encroachment permit for any of those, and the opinion was that would be too difficult for people on both sides to really require that encroachment permit.
I think the only problem with discriminating under 20 units is just that, it's discrimination. So now you've got an issue there too. So.
That's why we should get rid of them altogether. No discriminating against anyone.
I think you can accomplish the same thing without banners, with A-frame signs, particularly because of the size of them and the quantity of them.
We're leaving it alone?
Discussion.
Good discussion, Susan said. So we're going to leave it alone, or are we going to adjust it? Let's move off of this one.
Let's move on.
I think it's another one of those that you can tweak it later.
Let's flag it for the council as a heavily deliberated section that they can take up and expand upon.
Okay. Non-residential uses in residential districts is another category out there. So permanent signs, allowances for that type of use. So mostly this is churches. It can be other things by code, but I'm not really necessarily aware of anybody who have several churches that are in residential districts. So they allow for the awnings, the building wall signs, and the monument signs. Temporary, balloons, banners.
John, I
yes.
just, if you go back one slide. Well, we can't go back and redevelop the town necessarily, obviously. But do you think that the square footage ratio for the monument signs is sufficient? And I say that because so much of what we're trying to accommodate through all of these different signage provisions, especially in the commercial districts, is really stuff that should have been provisioned for with monuments. I think developers should have had a significantly higher obligation to showcase the suites or the tenancy of their particular development. So is that ratio sufficient to achieve that in your mind?
So it's, again, it's been a little while since I've looked at other community sign codes to remember how this compares, but here we're back to the commercial version. So it's 50 square feet, 12 feet tall. I know the 12 feet tall is pretty consistent with a lot of valley cities. The 50 square feet, I think, is fairly consistent too. It may be a little bit on the small side. So again, if the commission would like to recommend that we up that to something larger, we could. I'm not sure how many existing centers would come back at the cost.
I know, I realize that. But I don't know that it should necessarily be provisioned as larger, but I think that there should, in this case, be some discretion by the development director to, allow something that would be conforming with the development. I think there should be some additional subjectivity in that's maybe not provisioned by those caps.
Right. So, and we did increase it with the update a couple of years ago to allow two, one per 300 feet. We used to just be limited to one total, so we've already made that allowance for additional monument signs. And in 606 sign plans, again, nobody's used it. It's been a while since I've read the details, but there are allowances within that if you do a sign plan to increase sign area as part of that process. I'm seeing a 10% increase, and I think there's another one, that second one, if you do some other creative things. So there is some allowance if you do a sign plan already to increase those areas. Let's see here. So temporary non-residential, balloons, banners, flags, post and board, yard signs. So one thing I noticed, I was going back through here, we allow for the directional signs in terms of yard signs for non-residential in a residential district, but we do not allow for A-frames as a directional for non-residential use in a residential district. I've not noticed that before. So it'd be very easy to make that adjustment if you would like, to allow the same A-frame that you could use if you were a single-family homeowner. The church next door can't do that under the code as it's written.
Is that the example? So a temporary non-residential and residential would be a church?
That's the main one we have. Again, there could be others. The code allows for a few other things. I've looked around. I haven't really seen any of those other types of uses. Churches is the main thing.
So would an example of this be the DC Bar and Grill at Desert Canyon Clubhouse where they've got their A-frame sign down on Saguaro
No,
directing?
no,
No?
that's commercial. So the DC Grill is in a commercial zone. It's all one property, and so it's on the same property.
They have a directional sign down on
Right, it's an A-frame sign.
an A-frame on Saguaro.
Yeah.
That they don't pick up.
Ever.
Yeah, well, so what's an example? I mean, that's a non-residential sign in a residential.
So again, some of the churches over here along Fountain Hills Boulevard.
Vacation Bible School.
Yeah, they're going to have that, or they're going to have some fall festival at the church on the weekend. And so they can do yard signs, but they couldn't do an A-frame sign. The neighbor next door holding the garage sale in the same zoning district could have an A-frame sign or a yard sign. But the way it's written today, the church couldn't have the A-frame sign.
If we're going to allow the yard sign, we have to permit the A-frame sign.
I would think so.
Yeah.
So make that change.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions about temporary signs for?
Commissioner Watts
This
would
is what
like-
happens when you stay up too late reading this stuff. You focus on balloons. The height of the balloon, when you look at the size of the balloon, to me, was an obstruction of line of sight. So I think I think it was 6 feet, 2 feet from the top of a 4-foot sign, 6 feet. Doesn't delineate whether or not it's the top of the balloon or the bottom of the balloon. That's one. Two, I think it should be higher and it should be to the bottom. Sorry, I'm telling you, this is what happens when it's too late at night. So I think it should be higher so it doesn't obstruct view.
Good point.
Just as a point.
Okay. And so
There was no music with that, so there was,
will the commission have a challenge if we make some change, probably, I don't know, it's 8 feet too low because somebody could still tap it. Okay. So if I go back and look, I think the clear zone for a parking lot, no landscaping above 3 or below 7, so there's that gap. So if I say the balloon has to be at least, bottom of the balloon is 7 and top of it 10, some range like that, would that work? Clarify that. Is the commission okay with clarification on that with balloons? Okay.
I'm going to stop asking questions too. because
No, we need more importantly, we need the answers, not just the questions, so. Any other comments here? Okay. Single family. So really, single family itself, your single family house has no permanent signage allowance, except for maybe an address, but that's not even really covered here. Subdivisions, though, do have allowances for the wall signs and the monument signs. Otherwise, temporary signs in single family, the A-frames as directionals, flags, post and board, and the yard signs. I believe that's it. Any questions about temporary signs for single family? Okay. So that's a summary of the draft code. We've learned some good things this evening for some modifications and that we can go back and make. Hopefully Paul is keeping real good notes over there. So when we get to the end, we can summarize them. Hopefully then we can make those adjustments and go forward to council. So with that, I've got a few things that I do want to go ahead and discuss a little bit more with you. And again, we do have the full code below that we can go through as we may need to. So I just wanted to go again, just to remind the council and anybody who, or the commission and anybody who may watch this in the future about the challenge that comes along with allowing signs in the right-of-way under read, since we can't address content. So here's a street view of a local business here in town. Signs perfectly fine per code today and with the draft code. Under the new code, because we'd be allowing the A-frame signs in the right-of-way by right, they could move that sign out just during the daylight hours. It's in a commercial district, so they could do that and move it out there a little closer to the curb, a little bit more visible. That would be no problem. They could potentially do 2 signs because we're allowing 2 A-frames if you have 2 public entries. I don't know if this business does. I've been in there once. I don't remember if they have a second public entry or not, but if they have 2 public entries, they can have 2. But it's a total of 9 square feet. So one of these would probably actually have to be a little bit smaller. But we could also have this sign in the right-of-way. Could have this sign in the right-of-way, and that would be perfectly legal under the proposed code. Public square in the right-of-way, once we start saying A-frames are allowed or any temporary signs allowed in the right-of-way, we can't judge the message. And so it could be that. So before, when it was two signs clearly identified with adjacent business, we could go to the business and say, wait a minute, one of these is too big, or you don't have two entries, you've got to get rid of one. But in this scenario, where one of the signs really isn't theirs, so we can't go to them and say, what's this extra sign doing here? That would be allowed. Or if they did have their other sign, it was small enough and met the criteria, do that kind of situation. So just want to remind the commission that when we allow signs in the right-of-way, perfectly fine, but there will be some enforcement challenges that go with that, some education that will have to go with that about what you can and can't do with those signs.
You first.
This goes back to one of my general questions. I think that as part of the sign process in total, every sign ought to have identifiers on it, who the owner of that sign is, contact information, whether it's A-frame or whatever it might be. That way code enforcement can look at the back of these signs. Doesn't have to be on the front, but on the back. And then they'll know if that guy's got 3 signs there and he's only supposed to have 2, but they'll have some contact information for whatever the reason, education or discouragement. So that's just a general comment, one of many.
Right. Chair, Vice Chair, and certainly that would be helpful. It'd be good if they did. I'm not sure that we can require it because we can't require any content or judge a sign by its content. We can't have it removed if it's an otherwise legal sign just because it doesn't have contact information on it.
Can't we have it as a QR code or a barcode, something on the back?
It doesn't matter how it's done. If we say an A-frame sign is allowed in that location, an A-frame sign is allowed in that location regardless of what's on it or not on it. It'll be helpful and we can encourage it, but we couldn't remove it simply because it didn't have that information on it if it was otherwise legally there.
And they don't have to have a permit for it, so that we don't have it on their application.
Correct.
Okay, if we can't do it, we can't do it, but it seems to me common sense would say.
It would sure make it easier, as we're going to talk about in just a moment as we talk about enforcement.
Okay.
Because our first choice is always going to be to try to educate, to tell somebody, pick up your sign, relocate your sign, help them learn how to do it correctly. And when there's no contact information on there, it's very difficult to do, so it's certainly be in their interest to put it on there, simplify it for everybody. And so we can certainly encourage it.
John, we talked, I think, a month ago about limiting in the multiple sign scenario, limiting to 1 sign per elevation. Was that deemed unenforceable or non-viable?
Chairman, so yes, again, once we get out on the right-of-way and we say an A-frame, a yard sign, post and board sign is allowed, we can't address the content, and so anybody could put a sign in that location. We can't limit it to a business or a number of businesses, and once we start trying to do that and say, okay, we're only going to allow 1 sign per 50 feet or whatever, we come out and we find 3. Whose are the legal ones and which one is not the legal one?
It's an unlikely scenario, but it sure could make a mess of things.
Right, and yes. So I guess I want to come back there too. I'm glad you said it that way. So we want to make sure that it's just generally understood that can be, I guess maybe I should say instead of will be, there can be enforcement challenges. For the most part, we don't think there will be that many most of the time for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about more in a minute. Particularly with the A-frames. They're a little bit expensive. People are going to use them responsibly, and we certainly want to facilitate providing that signage for businesses that need it. trying not to be overly dramatic or try to paint a picture, things are going to be terrible. Just want to make sure it's out there that there will be some challenges. But we think we can address them. And that's why, as I've looked at it, I've come back to and put in the code the requirement for they're only allowed sunrise to sunset. We've talked to the code enforcement officers about their ability to enforce that. And they feel like something they can do reasonably. And so people will learn quickly that if they're out there and they get confiscated, that they won't want to do that again because they won't necessarily get it back right away. Legitimate businesses will learn to take their signs in at night, and it'll all be fine. And those people who are just out drinking up the streets with signs that they don't care about will learn that's not going to work. That's what we hope. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about enforcement. So we had a discussion a little bit last month, or last time we talked, concern about the cluttering and what the enforcement options were. That caused me to go back and look again at section 604 and 605. They've always been a little bit odd and clunky because they cover different aspects of enforcement and penalties and so forth. So we took this opportunity to combine them into one and clarify them so that part of it deals with permanent signs, another part deals with temporary signs because they're kind of cluttered together right now. And also changed the fine structure. I thought I put that here. Did I put it someplace else? I'm going to go down here. Oh, I guess I didn't. So I thought I'd updated this section right here to remind you what the difference was in the fees. Currently, in the code, if we ever got to the point of issuing a citation for a temporary sign, which we haven't, it would be a $50 fee for first offense, $100 for a second, $250 for a third offense. That seemed a little low. Most all of the rest of our zoning ordinance references section 183 of the town code for fees, for penalties. And so my suggestion was that we do the same thing here and reference that same fine structure instead of having something separate. That starts at $250 and goes up from there. Maybe that's too big of a step. Maybe we want to go back to what it is today or something in between. Certainly open to that, but that's what I did here for discussion purposes, was reference the other section like we do in all the other portions of the zoning ordinance. So with regard to enforcement on permanent signs, there's really no significant change there. It's kind of reordered the language in the code to put it all together. With regard to temporary, both per the code and then through our operating policy that we have, and I put in a little bit more clearly in the staff report. Our first choice is always to try to educate, relocate, return signs, help people learn what they can do. Where we have, either we can't, don't have the information on the sign to know who it goes to or where it goes to, or because we've had previous issues, confiscate is the next choice. From there, if we really have a repeat offender, notice of violation, ultimately to the citation are the choices that we would have. In my 4 years here, we've never gotten past the confiscation and return of a sign. Doesn't mean it won't happen at some point in the future, but people usually figure it out and want to comply, and we'll go from there. We are talking about, as part of that confiscation process, again, it was in the report, getting a little bit more formal in the return procedures to discourage somebody, okay, well, I'll put it out today and they'll pick it up and they'll give it back to me the next day and I'll put it out the next day. We'll set probably 2 times a month during a couple hours. Your sign was picked up. Here's the time you can come pick it up. It'll be a couple of weeks later. And so again, that'll be that discouragement for somebody that's not a legitimate actor to really try to follow the code with the signs. So any questions about that?
I've got a comment, if I may, Jay. Kudos to the code enforcement, because that was my big concern about, are they really going to be able to enforce it? But several of my neighbors have received notice of violation, and basically that's all it took for them to realize they're going to lose their sign if they don't comply. So I think whoever's stepping it up on the code enforcement side is doing a pretty good job. So
thank you.
Just a comment.
Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, just my thoughts around, I know we want to detract them from having to get to the place where the sign is confiscated. But I think you said it was like 2 weeks later they'd be able to pick it up, maybe 2 days of the month. It just sounds to me like they may want to come get their sign sooner. So that seems kind of limited. I think we might want to open that up and make it a little more flexible for them to come get their signs. And is it, just thinking out loud here, they can't just come, there's not a collection place where they can come and get it any time. They have to make an appointment.
So currently, that's what happens, and the way it's been is we contact them, we've got your sign, or they realize it's gone and contact us, see if we have it, and we'll say yes, and figure out a time and come get it. So we may hold on to it for a day, we may hold on to it for a week. I know we've had some signs for months because some people don't care.
Okay.
But the proposal is, and this is a proposal, and it would be administrative policy and not an ordinance provision, is that we formalize it.
Mm-hmm.
And our proposal is that it is just a couple of days a month, so that it's part of that discouragement from putting out signs that aren't really legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the business sign, somebody's running a legitimate business is going to figure it out, and they're going to want their sign, and they're going to take it in at night if it's out in the right of way. Done it once
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't get their sign back for 2 weeks. Okay, they'll probably figure it out and they won't want to do that again.
What are they going to use in the interim of that 2 weeks? I think my suggestion would be maybe to give them a little bit more of a window to pick that up if they need it.
Right, but again,
Maybe on first offenses?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a first offense when we, again, for a legitimate business, it's right there, we can identify who it is.
Mm-hmm.
We can go tell them first.
Okay.
And before we ever confiscate it, it's going to be a second or third time before we ever confiscate it.
Yeah, it just sounds like they'll have to remember, oh, what day of the month is it that I can go get this? Maybe it would be easier to say, hey, Wednesdays at noon or something, whatever.
Is it code enforcement that does the redistribution?
Yes.
Ultimately, so it's also about labor availability and opportunity costs, what else they can do. So I agree. I mean, there's a balance, but I think the first offenders should probably get a little more help along the way.
Sure, we agree.
Commissioner Watts?
Yeah, no, I agree with the staffing issues. I agree with 2 days a month, and for 2 hours, there's a window of opportunity to come collect your sign. But I really do want to emphasize again, the educational component, if you can find the owner, and then maybe kind of like the, who is it that does the passports? They have an expedite fee. So if you wanted to add an expedite fee that said, look, you've been an offender and you want your sign back, so it's a $50 fee for somebody to open up and get you your fee, something along those lines. So that's one. The other thing is that there were 2 words throughout this chapter that made it difficult for me to understand. Permitted and permitted were used interchangeably. Some signs are permitted in a certain area and other signs need to be permitted. How about allowed and permitted? So I'm going to go off of this topic for a second and get these 2 off before. And fines and fees. So when there is a confiscation, it's really not a fee at that point, it's a fine. Mm-hmm. So I'd really like to see those 2 words changed and maybe add an expedite fee for the habitual offenders if they're really serious and they want it. I sympathize with somebody that had their sign confiscated, and to Commissioner Corey's example, you should make some accommodation somehow. But that shouldn't be at the expense of town staff and the resources.
Okay, good points. Thank you. Anything else on this topic? Okay.
Who's had the most signs confiscated in town?
I don't know. But Vice Chair Watts, you are keeping track of all these changes so you can help Paula later with the motion, right? Okay, so my last thing before maybe see if we have public comments and if there's any other details to go through, is we did receive an email from a citizen that had some good comments and ideas in it. So I've summarized some of those here. There were a few references that they noted that need to be fixed. We'll certainly do that. They suggested that it might be helpful to have a definition of right-of-way so people know that it's someplace behind the curb. And so we can add that definition that, again, I haven't worked it out exactly, but that the signs, anyway, there's a space there from the curb back to the property line, and that's the right-of-way, and you can't put the sign there. They wanted us to look at additional ways maybe to clarify election signage. And so that was one of the topics that was almost floated earlier from 607. So this is maybe a chance here to talk about that a little bit more. But I'll go on to these others first. We can come back to that one. The other residential signs, which are, again, the yard sale, garage sale signs, he had a little bit of challenge with where it was in the code. I've thought about that, and to me, it still works pretty well. Although there is an opportunity maybe just to move it up into just the other sign types. We can consider that if the commission has some ideas or thoughts that would be better. He did point out that because the yard sign allowance was changed to 2 per property, that when we get down to the residential directional sign, says you can have 1 on your property plus 5 more. Well, really, they could have 2 yard signs to begin with, so that didn't exactly match. And so we could adjust that, and the same would really go then, I would guess, if you're allowed 2 yard signs, you're allowed 2 A-frames on the property. So we'll look at that. And then also had a point that maybe wasn't clear about medians, that the prohibition on medians, it would make it clear that's all medians, not just center medians, but side medians. So that'd be, again, an easy change to make. So.
Can I ask, all of the slip roads along, I think they're just along Saguaro, do we consider that, and Palisades also?
Yeah. Out there, a few on Fountain Hills Boulevard too, but anyway.
Do we consider the curb between the slip road and the main arterial there, is that considered a median as well?
I would call that a side road median as opposed
Okay.
to a median, I guess, but, yeah.
Commissioner?
On section, can I refer to a section? I just had a
Can.
comment.
Go ahead.
I can. It's 6.08A1.
Okay.
And it's mentioning, I believe it's in reference to the A-frame.
Yes, that is A-frames.
Okay. Allow sign on sidewalk. And I think it ended there. I don't know, that might be an opportunity just to make sure that it is not blocking someone's, walking, if somebody's walking by it, just to make sure that we speak to the safety element there.
So E Romanet 3(2)D shall not be placed on public sidewalk except the town center where there's at least 4 feet clear passage around at least one side.
Okay. I must have missed that part. Okay. And then one more, John. It was on 6.05. It was just a wording. The temporary signs, as are and as many. Wasn't sure if that was how you intended to write that or.
Sure it is. It sounds like the way I'd write something. 604, temporary sign 604B. So where,
605 temporary signs?
605 is now reserved.
Okay, so it may be in a new spot.
We took 604 and 605 and combined them and call it all 604, and 605 is now
Okay.
reserved
Maybe I
for
can
future
find it here.
use. So if you see it later, let me know. Because certainly any typos we can.
Yeah, hold on, I'm just going to do a Control F here and
Okay.
see where it is. Okay, it is still here. It's right above temporary signs.
Okay. So,
It's in 6.4.
A4.
A, D, 4D. Yeah, town shall have such other remedies as are and as many.
And then may from time to time be provided for, okay. I don't know if that maybe needs some comments, but
Is that right? I don't know.
I think it is. An attorney wrote it, so it's got to be right.
As are and as may, that's correct? Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Watts?
I want to jump back to the fines for a moment. That $250 for the first offense, I think is a little bit aggressive. I would support something like 100 for the first, 250 for the second, and then whatever we come up with at the third. But the first one, even with education and so on, people can still err, and that's significant enough punishment, I think, at $100 as opposed to 250. That's pretty aggressive.
At that point, though, you've been spoken to, you've been confiscated, and then you're fined. I mean,
250 though.
it's dinner at the Saddle Bronc.
I don't think so. Well, when you put it in that terms, okay. And then we're going to talk about the political signs as well.
Yeah, but before we go on, I just want to make sure, leave it as it is? We didn't get a
I
second
don't know. I
James
mean,
right here?
let's discuss it. I just think if you get there, you ought to be in the realm of feeling it a little bit, but.
That's at your third warning.
Well, yeah, if you assume you've been talked to, and then you've been confiscated and waited your 2 weeks, and then you hit your first tier of fines, I mean, you'd be in detention long before that if you were in school.
Maybe that's why I like the lower price.
Almost seems like you're intending to offend.
Okay, I'm okay with it then, from
I
that
mean,
perspective. I understand what you're
That
saying.
ends up being so discretionary anyway. No one, you said no one's been fined in 4 years.
Not the 4 years I've been here, no, we're not.
If Larry Myers hasn't been fined, nobody's getting fined.
This is true.
We work with people. Okay, so maybe we're back to 607 and some of the prohibited sign locations and election signs.
Yeah, I think, do you have anything? No, nothing else in the last one. I think that 607, there's mixed feelings on it certainly, but I think that for clarity's sake, I think we really ought to just have that simplified in any election. This book applies to any election, not just
Right.
those with a primary.
Okay, yeah, so 607, what are we at, B2A3, let's get so far down there. So it currently says allowed by state statutes during elections. I think we put a comma there, including those without primaries. That should make that clear.
Those that have primaries?
Without.
Okay, so that would account for like the sanitary district, obviously the school district, which is a hot topic today, et cetera. Okay, I think
That's a
that would
simple-
clean it up.
That's a simple add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be simple enough just to say that it should match the state statutes?
That's
Yeah,
what
so
it
basically
does
that's what we're
say.
saying is the
The
state
same thing?
statute would apply to any election, not just those with primaries.
Right, any initiative, any election,
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah.
The other thing in 607, if I may, okay?
Well, do I have an option?
No. Add distributors and contractors pursuant to like the Arizona Register of Contractors when there's disclosure on advertisements. It's 607B2D.
Okay, B2D. Okay,
And then I have a question on C3G, but let's start with B2D.
okay. Is there a question?
Just the comment about adding distributors and contractors. There's a list of manufacturers and so on,
Okay.
just to make sure
Okay,
that everybody's
okay. Now I
covered.
get what you're saying. Okay, so
Okay.
to Romanet 1, add,
Yes,
I'll get it off the
off the recording.
recording what you said.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got that.
And then I'm curious, C3G. Was this pulled out of the international building codes, the electrical code for nits and candelas, as opposed to lumens? All of a sudden, we're changing something from the standard building code, and nits are,
I don't know what a nit is.
it's a
Measured
3.4 plus lumen. So 100 nits equals 340 plus lumens.
Thought everybody else used lux.
Okay, and see, here we go with the conventional building codes. How did we get over to something that's more on the international building code? And it's just for clarification more than anything else.
So, again, a couple of years ago when we were doing that update, worked closely with the Dark Sky
Right.
Committee about what was the best way to do this measurement, and this is what they recommended.
They provided those, they're an international measurement, so that's what they did.
Right.
Okay,
Based on the measuring devices available, but this
Okay.
was the best way to go.
but also in the same area, and I don't think it's in C3G, previously, we talked about measuring foot candles at a specific height. Now we're going to measure output based in nits. How are we going to do that when we couldn't do foot candles before?
So I can't answer that with too much specificity or experience. But the first thing we'll start with is this is the current code that we're moving to the nonconforming section to be able to judge any existing signs, because if this gets passed as recommended, we won't have any new ones that aren't already built or permitted. And so this is the standard under which they have been reviewed and approved. And so we're a little bit challenged to change the standard. If it's really the same standard, just written a different way, I guess that would be fine. We need to understand it really is the same standard. But I would want to go back to the dark sky folks and the meters that they have and how they work to understand if a different approach would work just the same. But they were very comfortable that with the meters they have, this was the way to do it.
Yes, and I agree. So it was more of a curiosity question, because our building codes, lighting codes, the U.S. imperial codes don't reference nits and candles. So, and it also takes me back to what we didn't do last time because we couldn't measure foot candles. We're doing it here, but we didn't do it before. So at some point, I'd like to go back and figure out where that was so we can measure at 48 above finished floor or something like that. We have so many foot candles, which is the same equivalent as nits. So if we can do it here, we should be able to do it there.
Right. So again, getting outside my expertise very quickly, but they're really doing two different things as far as measuring the light source versus measuring the illumination that's on a surface that comes from a light.
Yeah, the light source is the lumens, and the resultant lumens, depending upon elevation, is the foot candle, the effective foot candles. But if you can do one, you can do the other. That's my only point. So.
Okay. So from here, as far as the presentation, I go through each section. I don't necessarily want to do that unless the commission wants to. I think this would be a good point for any public comments and then see where we want to go,
John,
Mr. Chair.
One more, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm trying to find the section number. It's the electronic message board signs, and I know we've deliberated that at length. Popular or unpopular, I don't know, but I'd like to put back on the table that we prohibit those going
Right.
forward.
That's what we did.
Is it? I didn't.
Yeah,
Is
so
it in there
yeah.
prohibited? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I know everything becomes non-conforming that's in place to date. And we say that, upon them becoming dysfunctional or abandoned, I think we said they would need to cease operation. Is there a time limit of sorts on that? Is it 120 days of abandonment before? If business A moves out and the property sits empty for 3 months, does that constitute abandonment and we could seek removal?
So the standards are in 607C. So abandoned for a period of 6 or more continuous months.
What's that? That's where I was looking. I thought it. Okay. That's if it's in disrepair, though. You have the option at that point to restore it back to its original. Okay. Okay. And then one other, this is just something new that I happened to notice a couple weeks ago driving at night, is we're starting to get, I think they classify as signage because they're designed to attract. We're starting to get rope light chasers in businesses. And I'm curious I don't know if we should or we shouldn't address that here with signage, but it's it's designed to attract you to the business, right? You're starting to see window frames predominantly along Saguaro that are getting these, multicolored chaser light schemes that are, they're hideous. And I think that they need to have a big X put through them. I think I'm getting old.
It's no fun.
The car wash. They got those chase lights everywhere now. They just put them on. You've seen them? Yeah.
So in 607,
I couldn't find anything.
let's see here.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, do eye-catching rope light chaser sequences fall under electronic messaging?
That's a bit of a question challenge, but if we look at
We like those.
607E, and I'm not remember what's here either, so we're going to learn together. 607E prohibited signs. So neon signs are prohibited. So I don't know if those are neon.
LED.
I don't think so. Animated or moving sign, including, so is that an animated or moving sign? Maybe it's an attention gathering
attention
device.
grabber.
So I'd have to look at it from that. And so that's probably the only thing we have in here right now that would address that. And so from there, we would have to look at 602.
What if we just say, if it spins faster than a barber pole, you can't have it?
How about if we say Chairman Gray doesn't like it, you can't have it?
That's fine,
That works
too.
Okay. So a sign means any device placed to attract attention by providing identification, advertising, or directional information for a business.
Well, number
that's a little
5,
questionable.
in that section, number 5 says flashing, blinking, or rotating lights. Does that cover it?
Okay, I didn't write
The
it.
following
Yeah,
types
so
of
that might-
illumination are prohibited flashing.
What section?
So
It's
under F.
607E, or 607F5.
on the illumination part, yeah, I didn't go down to illumination, okay.
A.
Yeah, particularly if we added traveling or to that list.
Yeah, I think I could. I think those are the right words, but I don't think they were meant to be applied in that manner. So I don't know what the right language is, but if we could find a way to tie that down.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
That's the consensus of the commission that we look for that? Okay.
Commissioner Watts?
I have 5 easy questions, and then I'll sit back.
You're supposed to have the answers. Okay.
I got the answers. We just may not agree on the answers, so. In 603F,
Okay, let me get there. Okay, so nonconformings,
building permit applications for signs shall include sufficient information. I think that's too vague. I think that word should be detailed information.
okay?
That's vague. I mean, if you like me, you're going to pass it with sufficient, and if you don't, you're going to make me jump through hoops.
Okay,
Okay? 604-4.
okay.
I'm curious as to why the wording was changed from shall to may. I think shall is the appropriate word.
Because sometimes that locks us in too much, and we don't have the discretion we might need in a given situation.
But it shouldn't be consistent when you say may. You have that ability by administrative right to be able to make discretionary exceptions.
That's what the may gives us. If it says shall, then we must do one of A, B, C, or D.
Right.
We can't choose an E if it's more appropriate in a given situation.
Okay? I'm really glad Paula gave this to me early enough to spend so much time on it, too. Thank you, Paula. A6F. It relates to the signboards at drive-throughs.
Okay, so 608.
A6F. It seemed to me that the area that's required for those signboards is pretty excessive. A lot of the drive-throughs don't have the room to be able to put the square footage of landscaping in that sign area.
Okay.
A15E.
Well, before you go on, does anybody, do we have agreement? We should change that? If so, what should we change it to? So right now it requires 4 square feet of, a minimum of 4 square feet of landscape area per 1 square foot of sign area at the base of the sign.
And the sign can be 4 foot, right? Or actually, the sign can be more than that.
Or well, yeah, the sign can be 20 square
20
feet.
square feet. So you got to have 80 square feet of landscaping,
Area.
which seemed to me to be an awful lot of landscaping for a business, for a drive-through.
4 foot wide, 20 foot long. Long drive-through aisle. Again,
I mean, there's a lot of, whether it's something like Filberto's or whether you go through Starbucks. Starbucks has none. Filberto's has scant amount, if none. Most of the drive-throughs have limited amounts, if any. So I would think maybe a 4x5 just to surround the post that holds it in the utility box that provides the power connections. But I wouldn't think 80 square feet would be reasonable for one signboard. So I would recommend 20 square feet, 4x5. And I may be the Lone Ranger on that one.
Well, what's the adjacency? Does it say in direct?
It doesn't, it says.
Is it a direct adjacency?
this says at the base of the sign.
Yeah, it's right
So
there.
it's direct.
A6F.
Of what section, of what,
Oh, or what number?
what number?
608A6F.
Yeah, 608. Sorry.
I'm going to leave you on the island on that.
Thanks. Well, with that, I'll go to the next one, which is A15E. Virtually every service vehicle these days is a rolling billboard.
Right.
And the 72 hours, the 48 hours doesn't even cover the weekends, let alone a weekend that's bumpered by a holiday.
Right. Let's see here.
A15E.
Right. So F Roman at double I. I think we did talk about that last time, and maybe I missed it, because I think we did talk about changing that from 48 to 72, and I missed that
72.
one.
Yeah,
think we did
I thought
talk
we
about
did, but I wasn't
that.
positive.
Yeah, thank you, I missed that one.
Okay. And then there's some talk in, I think it's 3I, I3s, the 3 Is,
Right, Roman at 3.
about service companies that park the vehicles out front of establishment. Are they bound by sign ordinances as well because of the verbiage of that particular section?
So if they left them there beyond the time frame, they would be, but they're typically, because they're service vehicles, they're moving, going to work.
What do you do if you got a guy on vacation, he parks his truck for a week? You get a fine for that?
Yeah, no, because by the time, you might get a notice, but you're not going to get to a fine.
I think emphasizing again the education part of the code enforcement people and some tolerance.
Sure.
You can't put in that you're going to be lenient, but the reality is the guys park their trucks. They are rolling billboards, so they should be governed by certain rules. I just don't want to be too punitive.
Right.
Okay? That's it for me.
Wow, okay.
All right, Paula, speaker cards.
Chairman, there are 2 speaker cards. The first speaker is Betsy Lavoy.
and it's not even 8 o'clock.
I know, just barely. Good evening, I'm Betsy Lavoie, 44-year Fountain Hills resident, CEO and president of the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce. I want to be here as a resource for you as commissioners. If you have questions about the almost 600 members that we represent and our businesses, I'd like to be able to answer questions as best as I can. So if there's anything you can think of. I know when you were talking about the developers and the 9 units versus 20 units, and for all decisions you're making, try to put yourself in their shoes. If you are a developer, you want your building to look beautiful. You don't want it to look cluttered. You're going to adhere it to the space on your building that attracts people to your building. Like, always think of the business or the developer. They want their business to look in the best light, for the most part. Also, I wanted to share that while we advocate for a more flexible ordinance, we remain committed to preserving our Fountain Hills character. Like I said, 44-year resident. I do believe that when we often ask for a more permissive sign ordinance, people think that we want a cluttered town. We don't. The example that John gave is unlikely that we would have an example like that by Desert Title and Tag. It's unlikely that we'll have 4 signs like that. It might happen. Hopefully code enforcement can take care of it. But again, for those of us who are residents and business owners here in town, we also want to maintain the beauty of our town. I also want to share that 50 plus years ago when McCullough put in the fountain, he put it in as a destination location. Whenever I mention Fountain Hills as a destination location, I have residents who say, no, we're not. We don't want visitors. It was our mission then. It is our mission now to attract people to our town. We should use that as an asset by allowing with the right signage, allowing our tourists, our visitors, and our residents to find our experiences here in town, to find our locations, to find our businesses, to find our attractions. And not only will this enhance their experience, but it'll encourage them to explore and patronize more establishments here in town. Keep in mind that our primary source of income is sales tax from our businesses. So we should be supporting everything we can for their prosperity. The Arizona Sign Association shared with me that for a destination location, Fountain Hills is the worst in the state for wayfinding signage and for our previous sign ordinance. So I applaud you for making it more permissive to get on the right track, and I hope that our council will also look towards better wayfinding signage. And I do have more talking points. I had to pick up my son from football, so I'm not going to go through those. I'm going to give those all to you if that's allowable, Chairman. And for Mr. Schlossberg, yours does not have my card on it because you have all my info. So if you have any questions, for them, specific to businesses, most of you have here.
Next speaker is Larry Myers.
John, did you do your own photoshopping of Desert Title, or did somebody else do that for you?
Chair, new Vice Chair, Commissioners. Larry Myers, undisputed heavyweight sign confiscation champion of Fountain Hills. First of all, I support what John did, what John wrote tonight. 2 things I came here for were to clear up the political First Amendment sign portion of this, to make sure we weren't going to get any more electronic signs in a dark sky community. But one thing did pop into my head while we were talking. So, and I'll just name them. Mr. Tollis's 40-foot billboard that's parked along Saguaro Boulevard for a business that supplies no revenue to the town. Town gets no revenue from mortgage business. Is that part of the vehicle wrap that y'all were talking about, because that's the most egregious sign in the entire town. And I watched code enforcement take down poor McDonald's now hiring sign because their permit ran out. Hopefully they get a new one because they obviously need help and they're a business. And they do supply us with revenue because we get the sales tax from the burgers they sell. So hopefully that vehicle wrap thing sort of gets addressed there with people like that. And otherwise, good job. Could have been one page, though. Good night.
No more speaker cards?
No, Chairman.
All right, let's go ahead and close the public hearing. You get in the business of confiscating RVs? Commissioners, any final comments, suggestions? Commissioner Dempster?
I have one more question, John. Do we currently have any electronic message center signs in for approval currently?
We did have a couple that inquired about them, hearing this may happen, but apparently they haven't actually submitted any permits, so.
Okay. Thank you.
So they would still have, so assuming this goes forward to council with a positive recommendation tonight, it'll be on their October 17th, is that Tuesday, agenda for their action, assuming they approve it that night, 30 days from then it goes into effect. So there's still this window where somebody could submit a permit before it goes into effect, but right now there are none.
Thank you. And just a thought, when you started with the slides by category, that was so much easier to follow. But I don't want to complicate things, but that was clear and concise, because, someone that isn't looking for, construction or commercial is looking on the residential side or temporary signs. It's clear and concise. It could go right to that section. So I don't know if that could be used. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. We will.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Well, I just want to say kudos to Mr. Steve Thomas, who wrote the email today. His comments were much appreciated. The corrections when you went through that, had to go through that thing in great detail to pull out the corrections he did, and so I just wanted to say kudos to him.
Yes, that was very helpful.
Commissioner Watts?
I got a list of spelling corrections that I could give you later, but other than that, I think it was a great job, and I appreciate it. And I agree with Commissioner Dempster that it was much easier to follow this than even the red line. And the red line was a huge improvement from what we got a year ago. So that's a great benefit. This might make it even easier by putting under a category so people can go directly to it and see it. So thank you very much for the effort.
Commissioners, I think we're ready to be done with signs. Open mic night for recommendation. Motion. Commissioner Dempster.
I'll make a motion, gladly. I move to approve ordinance 23-04, repealing and replacing zoning ordinance, Chapter 6, sign regulations.
With amendment or as stipulated?
Well, we made, with the discussion that we had this evening with recommendations for changes.
All right. Second.
Okay, Commissioner Dempster has made a motion to forward a recommendation to approve with annotations from this evening's discussion that, John, I assume you'll take off of the verbatim transcript. Commissioner Watts has seconded. Paula, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Corey?
Aye.
Commissioner DePauw?
Aye.
Commissioner Dempster?
Aye.
Commissioner Kovacevic?
Aye.
Commissioner Watts?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Stoshberg?
Aye.
Chairman Gray?
Aye.
7-0.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, John. All right, let's see, agenda item 8, commission discussion request for research to staff. Commissioners, anything for John or Farhad? Commissioner Corey?
Yeah, just one thing. Betsy reminded me of the wayfinding. I was just curious where we were on the wayfinding. Weren't we thinking about
Chair,
updating that a
Commissioner,
while ago?
So yes, unfortunately, again, I can't give you the absolute detail for how, I don't know if you're up to date on it, but there was some wayfinding signage that the town hired a contractor for several years ago and got most of the way through the process, got set aside. Public Works Director has picked that back up and has been working with the contractor, and I know he said he's getting close. That's as close as I can get to tell you how, where he is in that project, and I don't know if you heard from him in your dealings with him, but
It's in progress.
they have worked with the contractor. They had to go back and redo some of the design work because it wasn't finished and stamped and so forth, but they're someplace close to getting all that done, so we can't get those signed.
Okay, and then that'll come back to us?
Not that I know of. I don't know why we would. We're talking about the same, just general town wayfinding signs.
Yeah. Oh, that never came to us? Okay.
It may have, I don't know, because that was before my time when that was originally
Okay.
done. But
Was it monument signs or there was monument signs a couple of years ago.
There was an open house, and yeah, it did make the circuit. And there was an open house at the community center.
yeah, that's my understanding was good output or outreach at that time to develop the signs, but they were designed, and so it's been a matter of getting the actual construction drawings done.
Commissioner Dempster?
Yes, I, in support of our economics director and her plan that was presented and approved at town council, just want to put it out there, if there is anything proactive we can do with zoning to support that plan in the future.
And if I guess the concept, the strategy has been approved by council, and they were going back to them with some of the implementation steps and budget things, but there are several things in there that will likely come back through the commission as we work on implementation.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Watts?
Yeah, I thought the economic plan that was presented was initially in draft format with some edits to be done. And so there had to be some, I don't know another way to put it, changes to it, but fundamentally it's correct. And so I was looking forward to seeing it come back. I tried to find it on the website, and I could not. So that's why I think it's not in final format, it's just in draft.
Now you've done it.
Uh-oh. I thought that was my last question, but maybe not.
Hello, commissioners. So council approved the final draft. It is not a draft. It was proposed, but they did approve it unanimously last week. We'll make sure it's easy to find on the website. As Mr. Wesley mentioned, we'll be bringing forth our implementation strategy on November 2nd. That is a Thursday. That will be a mini council retreat. And so we'll highlight what we're proposing as short-term, midterm, long-term, ongoing. And we'll, of course, that afternoon, morning, we'll elevate the short-term just to make sure we're on the right track and that council is aware of anything that has a price tag. And a couple of those, as Mr. Wesley mentioned, will definitely become before this body.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
You had 3 requests, John. That's more than you've ever had.
I feel quite honored.
I feel honored. All right, let's invert it. Request from John.
My request of you is to go forth and have a good rest of your week. Checking with Farhad, we don't have any applications that have come in for an October meeting. There is a slight chance that I'll have a text amendment for you to consider. But I'm not sure at this point I'm going to be able to make the final tweaks to it to get it advertised for that month. So we may not see you till November.
Okay.
If you can stand that.
It might come back, Commissioner. All right. Anything else, John?
No.
All right. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
So now that we're adjourned.